You're really going to enjoy it. Now, you might have noticed, despite all my criticism of, comedy being full of all these young men, I am to all appearances a man. Never was my idea to have a gender. Not something I came up with. It would be strange to come into this world and come up with the idea of gender on your own, not the, most natural concept. What happened was, I was minding my own business being alive, and at some point I was informed that I was a boy. I had no idea what that was. I, knew very little about the world. I was learning shapes and colors. Just the bombardment of visual information into my eyes. I was trying to figure out what it was. A boy, and they said what a boy is you've got a penis that wiggles around there, and you like to run around throwing things. I said, oh, it does sound like me. You got me there. I'll go about being a boy then. And I enjoyed that, my boyhood as it was called, until I got two pieces of news. The first piece of news was that I was no longer a boy. I was now a man. The second piece of news was that as a man, I had to prove that I was a man. Didn't you just say, it turns out most of what being a man is just proving that you're a man, which is a very contradictory situation. I thought these adults hadn't really figured out the world and the way it worked, and I thought I'd check in with them later. For the meantime, could I just be a person? I was told there's no such thing as a person. You've got a man, which is a person, and then you've got a woman, which is sort of a person, but not really a person. And like, well, this doesn't really sound right, but I guess at least I got the person. Okay, so I'm going to go about being a man. So I thought I'd be the manliest man that I could be, which it turns out was not very difficult. As much as is made about manhood, all you really got to do is be very stubborn in one direction. Imply all your energy without much thought, just going directly ahead with determination. No strategy, no awareness. And the second thing is that if you have an uncomfortable feeling, you don't deal with it. Which is easier than dealing with it. That's really the lazy person's gender. So I was excelling at being a man. But there was one thing that was a sort of sticking point, which is that as a man, you're supposed to date and presumably have sex with women. Which, on the surface, not a problem, because this is what I fantasized about. This is what I wanted more than anything in the world. But two issues. One is that I do not know how to handle dreams in reality. If I awake in a dream, it's sort of as soon as I realize it, the dream dissipates, and then I wake up in my bed, and tired, and you're in bed. It's not fun. And so I thought, okay, I need to stop the dream from dissipating. And my strategy was, I have no idea how I got here, how this woman started liking me, so what I'm going to do is freeze. Until I stop messing up. And what would happen is eventually, she would move on. And then I would say, oh no! And I would start to put things together. Now that I was no longer terrified of losing this moment that I had just lost, I would start putting it together and say, in retrospect, that would have been the perfect time to do what they call making a move. And I'd figure out how that would have worked. And I'd say, oh, if only I could go back in time to that moment, I would make the perfect move. But never could I go back in time. It never happened. The only thing that happened was I went forward in time to another moment that was very much like that moment, but not exactly the same. So I didn't recognize that I had freezing. And so this happened a lot. And then the second thing is, whenever I want something for myself, the last thing I want, if I enjoy something genuinely for its own right, the last thing I want is a bunch of people getting their hooks in it, like a bunch of vultures, trying to get into my happiness. And so all these people who really desperately wanted me to date a woman in order to prove I was a man, I told them nothing about, all my hopes and dreams. And so then they began to develop a theory. The theory was that instead of dreaming about women, I was dreaming about men, because they believed if you're not dating a woman, you must be gay. And I thought, well, these people have a lot more knowledge of this whole sexuality thing than I do. They're very invested in it. So perhaps they're correct. And this is when a very shameful period of my life started. That's when I succumbed to homophobia. Not a recommended thing. In particular, I had a case of autohomophobia. I was afraid of myself being gay. And the things I was afraid of were mostly that if I was gay, no one would ever let me date women. The other thing was that they would constantly be bothering me, even more than they were bothering me already. So then I did what a lot of people do when faced with homophobia, is I went into the closet and I suppressed the very idea of being gay. And so what that did was it made me hyper aware of any time someone thought I was gay. And what happens is when you're hyper aware and you're sensitive to something, people can notice it. So it created this feedback loop where I would notice them thinking I was gay, and they notice me noticing them. They'd be like, this guy's the gayest guy I ever saw. And so then I finally got out of the closet. And the way I did it was I saw all these homophobes and I started to resent them. Even though I was, homophobizing myself, I resented even more the homophobes outside. And I said, I'll show them. I'll do what shows homophobes. I'll come out of the closet. So I went one night, I was like, come out. Turns out there's nothing in there. I'd forgotten the essential ingredient to being gay, which is that you have to actually like someone of the same gender. I thought, well, that whole episode was a waste of time. I guess I gotta finally figure out how to make one of these fabled moves. So eventually I figured out I'm having a great time. But what happens is the heterosexuals then come around and they're saying, hello, oh, you're one of us, great. Wasn't this great? Weren't we right all the time? Well, I told you. I said, you didn't tell me. You told me a bunch of weird stuff that I wanted nothing to do with. And if you hadn't told me that, I would have started all this in the first place. So to this day, I cannot stand your homophobes and transphobes and heteronormatives and gender essentialists of any stripe. Don't like them at all. And to update you on the current situation, all you need to know is that I'm married. You don't need to know the gender of the person I'm married to. What does you absolutely no good to extrapolate a general orientation, because as far as the rest of you are concerned, I'm not going to fuck any of you, no matter what gender you are. That's the point of marriage. And so if you're a little bit offended by that, if you believe that what goes on in someone else's married life is your business, then you're going to love our next comic. Give it up for Jane Keagle!